The Winnipeg Blue Bombers are 4.5-point home favorites over the Saskatchewan Roughriders on Saturday evening. The teams met 3 times in the regular season, with Saskatchewan winning the first matchup as Shea Patterson was at the helm. And Winnipeg swept the annual Labor Day home and home, despite losing Zach Collaros and Chris Streveler to injury over those 2 outings, respectively. Tempers will be high in this one, as Miles Brown was responsible for the hits that injured both Winnipeg quarterbacks in September, while Rider fans are still up in arms about Adam Big Hill's late-game hit on Patterson from all the way back in July. Brandon Alexander will return for the Blue Bombers at safety, while Anthony Lanier will draw back into the lineup for the Riders after being a healthy scratch last week in the West semifinal. JC, I'd love to know which team you got in this one and who you taking against the spread.
Well, I said that the East final would not be close. My opinion on the West final, completely the opposite. To me, this game is a coin flip. The margin of error between these two teams is going to be so small, and they're both playing excellent football right now. For me, I have to go with the Winnipeg Blue Bombers just because I believe they have the edge in terms of experience, and I believe playing at Princess Auto Stadium is the ultimate boost, the ultimate ace up your sleeve, because they're going to have that crowd behind them against their most hated rival for the entirety of the game. With that said, the Saskatchewan Roughriders, particularly on defense, have been exceptional at stopping what the Winnipeg Blue Bombers do best on offense. Brady Oliveira has not gone over 50 yards on the ground in any of the 3 games that they've played against Saskatchewan this year. I think that will be a critical factor because Zach Collaros has just not looked like the MOP caliber quarterback this season that we are used to seeing in years past. If Saskatchewan can keep it going on defense, and then offensively, they can use that 2-headed backfield of AJ Ouellette back healthy and Reichwell Armstead to penetrate the weak spots of this Winnipeg defense and get a few less 3-man rushes, bring a few more people up into the box so that Trevor Harris can pick apart this very, very good Winnipeg secondary. They're going to make a game of it. So I've got Winnipeg winning, but even with just a 4.5-point spread, I've got the Riders covering this game.
I agree with you on the spread there, JC. I think that this is going to be a field goal type game. There's lots to like about what the Riders did this past week. I do think it's worth noting the offensive line could be a bit of a question mark. Trevor Reed started all 18 regular season games for this club at left tackle. He is out. That pushes Travion Tate from right tackle to left tackle, Logan Ferland from center to right tackle, and then Peter Godber in at the center spot. And Peter Godber, longtime center in the CFL. Logan Ferland has started at right tackle in spots, but the offensive line is a unit you don't want to mess with at this time of the year. And changing 3 guys around is going to interrupt some of that communication. Now, I don't think that Winnipeg is going to come out of this one blitzing 5, 6, 7 guys on a regular basis. I think we're going to see a lot of what we saw from Winnipeg in the Banjo Bowl, which is rushing 3, dropping 9 guys back. In that game, Trevor Harris looked to pick at Tyrell Ford, the field side corner, and Tyrell got the better of him, twice picking him off, including a game-sealing interception. I remember talking to Ford in the locker room after that game, and he said, I like when offenses throw at me because that lets me decide if we win or lose, and I win a lot. That was the quote. I win a lot, and I loved it. But you mentioned the run game for Saskatchewan, which was pretty dormant all year long, has picked up as of late. That could force Winnipeg's defense to bring more guys into the box. We know from their depth chart, JC, they're not going to be heavy up front. Only 6 linemen. They are dressing 11 DBs. Saskatchewan, meanwhile, they've flipped the script. They're dressing 8 defensive linemen. They're clearly going to try to take away Brady Oliveira. And you're right. The Riders held him under 50 yards 3 times this season. The only team to do that multiple times, other than Saskatchewan, was Montreal. And we all know that they pasted Winnipeg in the first meeting back in week 1. And were it not for that miraculous gust of wind, they probably would have beaten Winnipeg again in week 21. That is how important Brady Oliveira is to this attack. So I'm not counting the Riders out. I think the Riders could get it done. But with the home crowd that Winnipeg's going to have behind them, a sold-out crowd of 32,500 at Princess Auto Stadium, I have to go with the Bombers. Because quite frankly, Winnipeg has not played very well the last few West Finals. They've been mediocre. But that crowd, the weather is such an advantage in Winnipeg. I think that they will get it done and become just the third franchise in modern league history to go to a fifth straight Grey Cup.
I'm glad that you mentioned that last point, Hodge, because I think it's worth diving into a little bit deeper. The Winnipeg Blue Bombers have not played well in West Finals. They haven't played well in the playoffs, even throughout this dominant streak, this somewhat of a dynasty that they've built over the last number of years. Particularly Zach Collaros has struggled in these games as well, but they've found ways to win more often than they've lost. So there's two sides of the coin. You can look at those performances and you can say, well, that makes me more likely to pick Saskatchewan to pull the upset because they've looked really good and Winnipeg has been vulnerable. Or you can say this is a veteran team that has seen it all, has been through it all, has faced all types of adversity. I think it was the last time these two teams played in the playoffs that Zach Collaros threw 4 interceptions, was it? And they still came back and won that game in the playoffs. They're that type of group that has seen everything and knows how to react to that sort of adversity.
It was 5 turnovers in the first half in that game. I believe it was 3 picks from Zach Collaros, one of which was on the receiver, 2 of which I think were on Zach. And then it was 2 fumbles as well, one from Nick Dembski, one from Drew Wolatarski. But regardless, JC, that is a perfect example, right? Different time of year. That was early December. That game was frigid. The weather forecast is pretty beautiful for Saturday, but it's a great point, right? This team played a hobbling Nathan Rourke in 2022, and in 2023, when BC came to town again, Vernon Adams Jr. tweaked his leg, and Keon Hatcher and TJ Lee went out relatively early with torn Achilles tendon. So the Bombers have gotten breaks during these West Finals at home. Do they still deserve to win them? Absolutely. Not taking that away from them. But they've undeniably had certain advantages here and there work to their favor. Do they need some of those on Saturday? No, I think pound for pound, they are a better team than Saskatchewan, as evidenced by their 2 wins head-to-head this season, including one in the Labor Day Classic. Almost 34,000 fans in Riderville for that one. That was a very impressive win from the Blue Bombers, especially with Zach Collaros not finishing the game. But I don't think that Winnipeg's margin for error is wide in this one. I do think that Saskatchewan is a very talented team. They're on the up and up. That defensive front is as good as any in the CFL. Their secondary behind it gobbles up the takeaways as a result, makes lots of plays. So I think that Zach Collaros has to be sharp. They've got to find a way to be better in the trenches. Winnipeg's offensive line started off the season quite poor. I thought was very good in the middle chunk of the season. And I think since then have been fine. They've got to find a way to get back to that attitude, that physicality they had in the middle third of the season. If they do that, I like their chances of going to a 5th straight Grey Cup.